Colonel Turner, I was pleased to have an opportunity to have a word with you about a book that I've received from America, which is the Committee of the 300, the story of the Committee of the 300, the Conspirators' Heirarchy by Dr. John Coleman. And I did read it, and then I found out that you'd had a copy as well. And I do know from my own contacts and the little bit of research that I've done that in the United States, John Coleman's book is very well thought of. I'm thinking particularly of Jeff Rent's. It's mentioned on Jeff Rentz's programme quite frequently, and it's in fact I did actually think I do seem to recollect that he was on Rentz's programme recently, on his internet programme, and I heard that interview with Rentz and Coleman. And my particular concern about this is I know that I know that the American people of our kind of persuasion are using that book extensively. So, having said that, I would just like to say a little word about our attitude to the Americans, because sometimes if we read Coleman, or if we read things from Lyndon LaRouche, we might get the impression that the Americans who value their independence think that that Great Britain, that England is a bête noire that is out as a unit to take them down, as per the Rhodes Milner's philosophy from 100 years ago. So I just wondered, Colonel Turner, what you thought of this book and your impressions of it.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make two things clear. One is that my interest in this book, my handling of this book, has absolutely nothing to do with my military background. My military background is that of the provision of engineering support. I had no association whatsoever with any military intelligence departments. The second thing is that I have been past this book, which is, as Robert says, has been I've had for some time, and I was asked to comment some years ago. I have no issue with Dr. Coleman. I don't know the gentleman. I don't know what he's a doctor of. And all I'm concerned with doing is passing on my observations on the book itself per se. I've not read any other of Dr. Coleman's work at all. Now, he's billed on the back cover as having served with the British MI6 Secret Intelligence Service. Now, he's also, I believe, South African. Now, I find it very hard to believe that Dr. Coleman was ever any integral part, shall we say, of MI6. The way the book is written and the statements made are totally at variance with the way any professional would have approached the drafting and compilation of the book. Now, there are two things that I would comment on immediately. One is that looking at the references to the British monarchy, it strikes me that there's a certain element in American society, perhaps those who follow these conspiracy theories, that the monarchy is at the heart of all these sort of evil manipulation. It's rather like adults who continue to believe in Santa Claus or Father Christmas. I don't believe they have a clue, despite the attempt to the extent to which they appear to soak up anything on the British monarchy. The second thing is that my overall impression reminds me of the way I used to tease my small grandchildren. Grandchildren are sort of smelly and noisy and rather objectionable. And I used to say that feeding grandchildren should be rather in the manner of a trough into which you toss all the food. Ice cream, sausages, cakes, sandwiches, you name it, buns, fried potato, and they mix it up and they eat it. And this is rather the way, to my mind, the book has been put together. It's crammed with a sort of material which really, handled properly, would have taken something like the 1,348 pages of Professor Carroll Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. Now, looking at the index, the first thing I notice is that there are no references in the text, or there's no bibliography, there's nothing of the meticulous indexing of, say, Nestor Webster's World Revolution or her French Revolution. She was writing in the 1920s and 1930s. Her books are laced with footnotes to support her statements. Everything is quite meticulous. They're totally different in character. Now, Nestor Webster was credible enough to address officers of the Royal Artillery in, I think, 1920 at the Royal Artillery Institution. She also addressed the officers and warrant officers of the Brigade of Guards in London, and she also addressed the Metropolitan Police. Now, this book certainly doesn't have that same credibility at all. Now, as a professional intelligence officer, I would require definitive proof, definitive evidence, and of course it's almost impossible, virtually impossible to come by, of exactly what relationship, if any, Dr. Coleman had with the British intelligence services. Now, he, at the outset, suggests, the book suggests at the outset, that it wasn't properly edited. If it was, then it was very badly edited, because the very first page, Roman I of the foreword is spelt W-A-R-D. It is W-O-R-D, unless I've missed something. Forward, it is quite incorrect. Now, he then makes a sweeping statement on this first page about secret societies, such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers. The Bilderberg group would be much more correct. The Trilaterals, the Trilateral Commission, the Zionists, Freemasonry, Bolshevism, Rosicrucianism, and the spin-offs of these secret societies. They are not secret societies. It's a total misstatement in my view. They have their own membership and their own philosophies, but there's nothing secret about them. Everybody knows about them. Bolshevism, it's no such thing as a secret society. It's a totally different entity. And anybody who knows anything about Soviet communism and the history of Marxism-Leninism would know that. It's quite open. Now, as one ploughs through the pages, one comes across these glaring errors or misstatements or claims. He refers to the delivery by Olaf Palme and the Club of Rome of technology to the Soviet Union on a list forbidden the forbidden list of United States customs. Now, I would like to see the proof of that, but Dr. Anthony C. Sutton, in his two books, Military Aid to the Soviet Union, I forget the name of the other one, it's an update, is a far better appraisal of what actually did take place. It certainly took place, technology and equipment. But to make a statement like this needs proper substantiation. This is not a professional way to go about it. Now, where did President Bush get his orders to act in this monstrous fashion. He got them from the Royal Institute of International Affairs, who received this mandate from the Committee of 300, also known as the Olympians. Now, what he's talking about is the invasion of Iraq. I assume it's the first President Bush. He doesn't say so. Perhaps it was drafted before the second invasion in 2003. I have to assume this. Well, this would be true. Now, this is a totally unsubstantiated statement. It is rubbish as written by a professional. It doesn't stand at all. Where is the proof? It is not listed. There are no footnotes, there's no bibliography, no reference to a bibliography to support it. Now, in terms of the killing of 12,000 Iraqi soldiers buried alive in the trenches they occupied, okay, where does he get it from? Ramsay Clark in The Fire This Time gives an infinitely better and more detailed appraisal of what took place. Now, that was an obvious reference. Now, here we say, some even know that the Round Table has a big input into the United States through the British ambassador in Washington. Prove it. What is the function of the British ambassador in Washington? What is his connection with the Round Table? Is he speaking about a specific appointment or an individual by name? Now, you can't make a statement like that. Some even know is rubbish. It makes nonsense for a professional to write like that. It's a very unprofessional way of going about it. Any professional will write with meticulously justified and researched and reference checks of anything he puts down. You don't move on any subject before you've validated it by cross-referencing and so on and so forth. Now, Aldo Moro, the former Prime Minister, was threatened by an agent of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Proof. Kissinger is mentioned at the end of that paragraph as being involved. Proof. And so we go through the book on this basis. Now here we say Kissinger's role in destabilizing the United States by means of 3 wars, the Middle East, Korea and Vietnam, is well known, as is his role in the Gulf War. Proof. However, the Korean War took place, I think, round about 1950, 52, 53, that period. Kissinger was born in 1923. He was a teaching fellow at Harvard from 1950 to 1954. I don't see what connection he could possibly have on a diplomatic level in fomenting or having any role in the Korean War. It's not waterproof, as it were. Now we come to a very interesting one. Lonrho, the giant conglomerate run by Angus Ogilvy. Now, the first thing I notice is that he hasn't even spelled Ogilvy correctly. He spells it I-E and not Y. Now, if you check Who's Who, you will find that Ogilvy is spelled with a Y. Perhaps he's confused it with Julian Ogilvy Thompson, the chief executive of Anglo-American Gold, which was also a major conglomerate in South Africa, now run by Angus Ogilvy. I rather doubt it. He resigned in 1972. He got his fingers burned with his dealings in the city, I believe. It was an embarrassment to the royal family, and he pulled out. He may have been very much involved in the City of London, but I would like to see this properly spelled out. Now, you go on through the text with numerous statements of this sort. It's too loose, by far. The name New World Order is seen as something developed as a consequence of the Gulf War in 1991, whereas the One World government is recognised. By whom? As being centuries old. Not stated. It doesn't hold water on that basis. The Club of Rome has its own private intelligence agency and also borrows, inverted commas, from David Rockefeller's Interpol. Now, I don't see how Interpol can be connected with David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller's Interpol. I don't know it as any such thing. But even then, if he wants to make a statement like that, he has got to provide the definitive proof. Stasi, the East German Intelligence Service, STASSI, I believe it's a single S. Again, you're into proofreading and sweeping statements. Now here we are, here we come to the royal family. And this almost childlike image of the royal family. He refers to Queen Elizabeth's palatial property in Deauville, France. Does she have property in Deauville, France? I very much doubt it. I've never seen any reference to it or any reference to the royal family being there at any time. Now, I'm afraid there's in cases like this, and with so many people who read this type of book and compile this type of book in this field, they have no idea about the monarchy as being a constitutional monarchy. They think the Queen... I mean, Lyndon LaRouche painted a picture, I remember years ago, of the Queen in her 20s, newly married, newly on the phone, as though she sat at the centre of the international drugs racket. Do they think she sits at a desk with a battery of telephones and subordinates manipulating the drugs trade? It was childish. Luckily, LaRouche has grown up a bit. He's more adult these days because he produces some excellent work. And I met a number of his team 20 years ago, and they were very interesting people. Now, Mark Birdman, who came over at the time of the Single European Act and Final Act, which really sort of set the seal to us going into Europe, when LaRouche produced an excellent document on the European Union, Blueprint for Dictatorship. Mark Birdman told me, amongst other things, that the Queen had presided over a dinner of bankers on board the royal yacht. Well, okay, so what is sinister about that? Her Majesty the Queen has to be involved with people at that level in society. It didn't convey very much. It was reported to me as though she was plotting in some way some financial sort of perhaps global scheme. She naturally would entertain people like that. He's reading far too much into that. We go on here, next page. Throughout these years, Kissinger, as a designated contact man, kept in close touch with Moscow on behalf of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. How does he know? How does he know Kissinger had any connection of that kind with Chatham House, as it's known, and refers to Kissinger's friends in the Kremlin? Now, okay, diplomatic exchanges went on all the time, and it doesn't follow that Kissinger was doing anything on behalf of Chatham House. Now, I believe he is an honorary member of Chatham House. I believe he's got an honorary knighthood. Okay, you join the dotted lines, but it doesn't necessarily say that going to Moscow was connected with his membership of Chatham House. Then we have, what are the goals of the secret elite group, the inheritors of Illuminism, Moria, conquering wind, the cult of Dionysus, and so on? I don't see any proof there. I don't see any expansion of those groups or terms. And I don't see how this can have any validity in the text of a book of this nature. What do we have here? Most of Solidarity's leaders were descendants of Bolshevik Jews from Odessa and were not noted for hating communism. Now, Dr. Coleman claims to have done a great deal of research in the various archives. Most of Solidarity's, are they listed by name? Is there any proof that they were descendants of Bolshevik Jews? Now, we know perfectly well from a British government command paper 1919 number 1 of April 1919, that certainly there was a very strong Jewish element in the Bolshevik Revolution. But this does not follow. It needs to be substantiated, otherwise such a statement should not be made in any responsible work. Lord Carrington, a top-ranking member of the Committee of 300. Now, in this he's linked to Dr. Henry Kissinger. Now, certainly Lord Carrington was a member of the board of Kissinger Associates. There's no question about that. That is listed. But to read this comment about Lord Carrington, a top-ranking member of the Committee of 300, it doesn't make sense. It's not proved. And you cannot make statements using the authority of a background of any secret service to make that sort of statement. Now, here's another one. He was a long-time confidant of British Labour leader and Committee of 300 member Anthony Wedgwood Benn. My only comment about that is absurd. Anthony Wedgwood Benn is a politician. He's a Labour politician, a socialist politician in the old traditional way. He's well known. He may be, but it would be quite extraordinary. But if he wants to make a statement like that, he must prove it. You can't make statements in a responsible work that people are going to follow. Now, here we have the Anti-Defamation League is an outright British intelligence operation run by all three branches of British intelligence. That is the MI6 and the JIO. I've never heard of JIO. All three branches, and he quotes what appear to be two organisations. The JIO, I suspect, is a misprint for JIC, the Joint Intelligence Committee, which is a totally different entity, which obviously involves representation from more than MI6, MI5, military intelligence, and no doubt the Scotland Yard Special Branch. But attendance or representation at the JIC, I'm sure, will depend on the needs of the moment, what particular problem is under consideration. It follows. But I mean, this statement to say all three branches of British intelligence are running the Anti-Defamation League, proof. It's a wild statement that makes no sense at all unless it is specifically justified, proven, and it is not. Here we have another one. The most British Petroleum, one of the most important companies in the Committee of 300, in which Queen Elizabeth's immediate family has a big stake. Prove it. How do they know Her Majesty and her family have any stake in any company, and any company connected to the Committee of 300? How does he know? I mean, do you have a company as opposed to an individual in a committee? Makes no sense. It's another demonstration of this obsession with the monarchy, this half-baked obsession with the monarchy. Bernard Levin, I see, is listed. He was a journalist, if I'm talking about the same Bernard Levin, who wrote leading articles in the Times newspapers. Bernard Levin, Levin. This is page 41. On page 47 we see Lewin, Lewin. Now, is this the same man? They appear separately in the index because I checked. As far as I can see from the text, he's referring to the same man. In other words, this book wasn't properly proofread anyway, if it was proofread at all. I mean, you cannot put a work like this on the market with errors of that kind. Now we have a statement here. Pluck this one out at random. Dr. John Rawlins Rees, promoted to Brigadier General in the British Army. Now the rank of Brigadier General vanished round about 1930. Now what period are we discussing here? Because, again, I don't see this. Now let us go on to more statements here. Sir Peter's Vicar's Hall. He's mentioned as the son-in-law of Sir Geoffrey Vickers. I tried to trace Sir Peter Vickers Hall. No trace of him at all in the references. Maybe I missed something. Let us go on to a little more. President Jefferson once said he pitied those who thought they knew what was taking place through reading the newspaper. Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, said much the same thing. He's referring to Coningsby, I suspect. Now, Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, wrote a series of books, and what is significant here, and of course is not picked up, is that Coningsby and the other books were, as it were, fiction works, which were really, in effect, faction works. Disraeli was conveying a message, and in that book, reference is made to the 1844 revolutions being prepared in Germany. In fact, I suspect this has a direct relationship with the 1848 revolutions, which took place in simultaneously across Europe, not in the UK, where they attempted to foment a revolution, I believe. But they broke out simultaneously across Europe. So he missed a point there, if there was anything worth making with that particular question and Disraeli's work. It is the Queen of England who bestows honours on upon men in the top positions in the drug trade. Now, again, this obsession with the monarchy and Her Majesty the Queen. The Queen, I don't know, I'm not part of the system, but it is generally accepted, and I'm sure it's correct, that the Queen bestows honours as recommended to her. And she doesn't personally bestow. She has her own limited list of honours, I believe, the Victorian Order and so on and so forth. But not generally. She merely rubber stamps it, in effect, as a constitutional monarch. Now, brackets. Oh, here we are. Reference to the opium trade in China. The Beatles could not have done a better job. In both cases, in brackets, the trade was sanctioned by the British royal family, who openly supported the Beatles. More obsession. And it's really a meaningless statement. I quite fail to follow the logic. Now, here's a statement, you see. The British Army was stationed in the Khyber Pass to protect caravans carrying raw opium from being pillaged by the hill tribesmen. Did the British royal family know this? They must have. Now, that's part of history. The Afghan wars of the late 19th century. But, oh dear, I've written at my comment at the bottom. I mean, what a statement to make in a supposedly responsible definitive work. Did the royal family know? Either he can prove it and state as much, or he doesn't. To say they must have is arrant nonsense. I mean, it's unbelievable as a statement in a book of this kind. They say, I've no issue with Dr. Coleman, but this is what he chose to write. He has to carry the can for it. He was the one who wrote it. Here we are again. That he was supported by the British press and the New York Times, comma, a British intelligence-run newspaper, comma, speaks volumes. Proof? I've no idea. But it doesn't hold water to me. And so on. The rest of the page is much in that vein on that subject. Now we reel forward a little. And we come to another. You can see on the film, I mean, this book is a forest of little coloured tags where I've been through it. Prince Charles, the big names send forth their message. Prince Philip is one of their heroes, yet his son Prince Charles owns 1 million acres of forested land in Wales from which timber is regularly harvested. And in addition, Prince Charles is one of the largest owners of slum housing in London, where pollution thrives. Well, you know, prove it. It's a wild statement which really has no credibility at all. You cannot make statements like that. In a sense, it's libelous, if you like, to push a point. Now, where do we go from here? The Mathesons have appeared. Let's go further up the page. The Committee of 300-member Jaffet controls Charterhouse Jaffet, which in turn controls Jardine Matheson. Well, this is the sort of thing possibly that you can get in various business references. I wouldn't argue with that. The Matheson family, also members of the Committee of 300, were kingpins in the China opium trade, at least up until 1943. The Mathesons have appeared in the Queen of England's honours list since the early 19th century. It's nominally the Queen's list, but again, it is not her personal remit. And, it's a misunderstanding of the system. Interesting matter of editing. At the top of page 146, the reference is made to Crown spokesperson Sir R. Temple. I don't know why the R not spelled out properly. The following paragraph begins, Turner was answered by a spokesman for the monarchy. Now that's inconsistency in the text. That's not the work of any professional author, and certainly it should have been edited out. Let us go on. Yes, here we are. Another interesting one referring to Queen Victoria. Now, I believe Dr. Coleman claims to be an authority on the Boer War, is what I'm told. Now, we read, when the poor, untutored pastoral people in South Africa, who became known as the Boers, fell into the blood-stained hands of the British aristocracy in 1899, they had no idea that the revoltingly cruel war was so relentlessly pursued by Queen Victoria, it was financed by the incredible amounts of money which came from the instant fortunes of the BEIC opium trade in China into the pockets of the plutocrats. Queen Victoria didn't personally authorise. She was constitutional monarch. Her government precipitated the Boer War. It was a very cruel war, and there were a number of underlying issues here. It is well known that the concentration camps were invented by the British. It is well known that Lord Milner, Sir Alfred Milner as he was at the time, I don't know whether he was High Commissioner, I think he must have been the Governor-General. Milner was home in London, and his deputy was the General Officer Commanding General Sir William Butler. Sir William Butler discovered that a plot was being fomented to precipitate the Boer War. He communicated with Milner in London to warn him. When Milner returned to South Africa, Sir William Butler was sacked. Now that is ominous, but if you read Carroll Quigley's Anglo-American Establishment, you will read a far better and more credible expansion on what followed through Milner, Lord Milner eventually, the Round Table groups, Milner's Kindergarten, and the formation of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. The Royal was added later, and the Council on Foreign Relations. But I wouldn't accept any statement here. Now, here we have a reference to the Scottish Rite Freemasonry principles in connection with the Rothschild family, it would appear. Here, oh yes, interesting, using Scottish Rite Freemason principles in selecting members of the Round Table. The Round Table. Certainly those groups existed. Now, clearly, Dr. Coleman does not appear to understand his Freemasonry. I return to that point in a moment. The following page, some of the spin-offs of the Round Table are the Bilderbergers, set up and run by Duncan Sands, cobblers. The Bilderbergers were formed in 1954, and one of the founder members was the British Labour Member of Parliament, Dennis Healey. Another I seem to remember was Lord Carrington, but they were continuity members of the Bilderberg group. I don't believe there's any references to Duncan Sands. I've not seen it in my records. And where it comes from, I have no idea. In 1952, following page, Kissinger was sent to the Tavistock Institute where R.V. Dix took him in hand and turned him inside out. That was when he was supposed to be involved with the Korean War, same period when he was a lecturer elsewhere. Now, it can only get worse. New sexually degenerate cults are even now being set up by the British Crown. What absolute rubbish. Drivel, working through the SIS and MI6 services. Now, MI6 is the SIS, another term for it. I mean, how does he come to write this? It's the same thing. And how does he know the British Crown are involved? Prove it. It's childish. And how people can soak this up is beyond me, quite frankly. Here we come to Britain's MI6, brackets SAS. Now, SAS, the Special Air Service Regiment, maybe it's a misprint for SIS, Special Intelligence Services. As published, SAS has obviously missed any proofreading. Now, SAS, the Special Air Service Regiment, is an interesting one, because any professional worth his salt would know the function of the SAS. And very interestingly, as I was taught very sharply, the special services, the Green Berets, the Special Boat Squadron, all operate, shall we say, generally to the same principles. They are specialist units. I once made the mistake of saying to my mentor, well, yes, they're rather like the Spetsnaz, the Russian Spetsnaz, are rather like the SS. And I was drawn up very sharply and told there's no comparison at all. The Spetsnaz have a very specific role within Soviet military doctrine and the Soviet forces organization, integral with intelligence and a specific role in knocking out nuclear weapons installations. Now, okay, they may use the same techniques, working in high-honed, highly qualified teams. But you see, I then said, oh, well, yes, it's special services. No. Special services are cooks, signallers, engineers. The Spetsnaz are forces of special designation. Now, you see, when you look at the statement here and what I was taught, it's all mixed up. But no intelligence officer would have written that sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Now, officially, MI6 does not exist. Well, I think that's a misstatement. Everybody knows it's around. Its budget comes out of the Queen's purse and private funds. Now, proof. I mean, these organisations are government financed, and I mean, it's a wild statement as it stands. Again, it's this obsession with the monarchy. Now, here we have a statement about the Committee of 300's connections with experiments, in inverted commas, carried out by a family member, royal family, who was also a highly placed member of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Nonsense. We'll come to the Scottish Rite in a moment. It's interesting. Now, let us reel forward, because we're going into an awful lot of detail at the moment. Here we are. Here's a classic. Having mentioned Angus Ogilvy, spelled incorrectly again, it goes on to say, comma, Prince of Companies, who is married to Her Royal Highness Princess Alexander, sister of the Duke of Kent. Duke of Kent, leader of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, balderdash, and who takes the place of the Queen when she is outside Britain, cobblers. Now, in the order of things, nobody takes the place of the Queen when she's outside the country. She remains the monarch. She may be represented, according to the correct protocol, by other members of the royal family in her absence, say in presentations of decorations, investitures, that sort of thing. Any member of the royal family, according to, I imagine, the protocol, may attend on her behalf, but they do not stand in for, and not specifically the Duke of Kent, when she is outside Britain. I mean, this is so convoluted and rubbishy. It's unbelievable. It's drivel. Now, leader of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Now, the Masonic Handbook lists the Duke of Kent as the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. Now, that is the global lodge, rather like the head of the Anglican Church. They control the Anglican Church worldwide. The same thing applies to the United Grand Lodge. Now, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is a distinctly American, United States breakaway splinter group on the lines of Grand Orient Freemasonry in France. Now, in the late 18th century, a schism occurred, and it's all well described in Findle's History of Freemasonry, published in 1869. A schism occurred by which the conventional Freemasonry in France split, and with the Grand Orient. The Grand Orient was a splinter movement, and I refer to it, for ease of reference, as the godless Freemasonry. Now, a Freemason who, say, visits France and is invited to be a guest at a French lodge should, as I recall, clear this association, this invitation, with the Grand Lodge of England in Great Queen Street. They are not encouraged or not allowed to visit a Grand Orient Lodge. Now, the same schism. Yes, just to conclude this reference to the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the Scottish Rite applies to the United States. It is a breakaway movement equivalent to the Grand Orient in France. And its Grand Master in the 19th century was Brigadier Albert Pike, who wrote a mighty tome called Morals and Dogma. And you open that and you get instant indigestion. I've never been past the first few pages. But if you consider the Scottish Freemasonry, where he's totally mixed up, is, as I remember, under the jurisdiction of the United Grand Lodge of England. Now, there are differences. Scottish Freemasonry, they wear the apron under the jacket instead of over the jacket. Now, these are the only differences, but the Scottish Rite Freemasonry is a totally different animal, and clearly he's got this mixed up, totally mixed up. The mind boggles on reading it. The Bronfman family are cutouts, in inverted commas, what is known in MI6 as frontmen, inverted commas, controlled from London by MI6 deskmen. I think that's a term you could pick up anywhere. Now, what is the proof of that? The Bronfman family, I recall Edper Investments, one of the great chemical corporations. They're well invested in the media, in the various corporations. Without the list, I can't be more specific. But what makes them frontmen for MI6? I mean, it's a totally irrational statement unless he has definitive proof. Now, Here we have a reference to the Order of the Garter. Lord Hartley Shawcross, who is believed, totally unacceptable statement, to report directly to Queen Elizabeth II, was on the board of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, blah, blah, blah. Now, is believed to report directly. He was born in 1902. In 1991, when this book was published, he was 89. I mean, he was out of the reckoning. It's a worthless statement. We go on to page 194. I read, a business partner of the Jacob de Rothschild family, not de Rothschild. Parts of the family use the title de Rothschild, others plain Rothschild. And I looked up the current who's who. Jacob de Rothschild, no. It is not Jacob de Rothschild. And I don't believe that was properly checked. You don't make mistakes like that. The project was housed in Wellington House, named after the Duke of Wellesley. Wellesley, W-E-L-L-E-S-L-Y. I don't know who he is, but it's certainly nothing I've come across. A reference to Robert Cecil of the Jewish Cecil family. Proof. I haven't even bothered to look up the family in who's who. It is not a Jewish family as far as I know. It's an old English establishment family. Another reference to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Now, here we have a reference to the Round Table. And Buchan was chairman at the time and a board member of the RIAA and a member of the Round Table, reportedly very close to the British royal family. You cannot, in a responsible work, make a statement, an allegation like that. Either he was close to the royal family and you prove it and say how and why, or you don't even attempt to write it. Now, here's a perler. Here we start the paragraph. Among the governing council of this gigantic propaganda opinion-making apparat, whatever that means, is included the following. Frank Kitson, a one-time controller of the IRA, provisionals, and the man who started the Mau Mau insurgency in Kenya. Now, Kitson was born in 1926. He was in Kenya from 53 to 55. He won a military cross as either a captain or a major, I can't remember which, when he went bush in tackling the Mau Mau. Now, I mean, to make a statement that he's done here is total rubbish. The GOC, I can't remember his name, but he was a four-star British general. Now, you see, to confuse whoever might have had anything to do with the Mau Mau insurgency in Kenya to start the Mau Mau insurgency is nonsense. He was a relatively junior officer. And now, a one-time controller of the IRA provisionals. Now, that's an inflammatory statement. I recall Kitson as being GOC and C in Northern Ireland at one time during the Troubles. He's certainly written a book on internal security. Now, that doesn't make him a controller of the... Controller, what does that mean? Of the IRA provisionals. What does that mean? Proof it. That really is a very dangerous statement. And it's really dragged out from the rubbish bin as far as I can see. It has no credibility at all. Another reference to the monarchy and this obsession with the monarchy, a very unhealthy obsession with the monarchy. And we come to a reference here. The proposal was ordered by the Ditchley Group, which had its beginning in May of 1982 at Ditchley Park in London. Rubbish. The Handbook of Foundations lists the Ditchley Park as being located at Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire. Now, if the worthy Dr. Coleman cares to contradict me, he's welcome to do so. Proof is what is required. Well, that, you see, is really the sum total of my fairly detailed survey of the book. When I, having looked at it years ago, I was asked to have another look at it, and I went through it, and quite frankly, I think it's a load of drivel. It is insupportable as a reference document. I'm sorry, Dr. Coleman, but as far as I'm concerned, that is my view of the book. There are far more responsible references, and books like this tend to be crammed full of miscellaneous, unsubstantiated facts, suppositions, and so on. Where he did his research, I have no idea. I assume he did research of some kind. But it is cobbled together here in a book which doesn't hold water. And that is as I find it. Simple.
And Colonel Turner, would it be fair to say that you think that that book doesn't serve the purposes of people that are struggling to re-establish some kind of accountability in politics and the way they're governed, and really we just don't know how it's got to be so well known amongst the Americans.
I've no idea. I mean, I heard the Jeff Wren's interview. He's obviously regarded as a highly respected authority on what he's written about. But, you can't have it both ways. It simply does not add up. No, I don't believe any individual with a secret service and intelligence background, as claimed, would write in that way. I believe any professional would write in a totally different, analytical, detailed, substantiated way, fully referenced. You don't move on from one fact to another until the first fact has been absolutely validated to your satisfaction. And if there's any doubt, you don't use it. Or if you need to use it, you refer to the degree of reliability. But there's nothing of that sort in there. There's no bibliography, as I say. There are no footnotes. I mean, it's there as it stands. It's no good arguing the toss about that. I mean, he's covered infinitely too much anyway in one book. The sort of things he's covered should be covered properly in far more specialised books with a limited scope, rather like Professor Carroll Quigley's Anglo-American Establishment is a good example. And as for, as I say, the reputability of the book, I mean, Nestor Webster is a case in point. That is an excellent example of how such a book should be written. But she hasn't tried to cobble together facts culled from all sorts of sources. Most of what he's put in there anyway is the sort of thing you can get from numerous reference books that pretty well of the same ilk. These facts are freely available, but I mean, there's no, as far as there's no genuine research in that at all. Nothing. Otherwise, he would be able to substantiate what he claims.
The books by, for example, by Professor Sutton, Anthony C. Sutton, they're well annotated, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, they're written properly by an academic. And the books I have, are covered by far more detailed works that he's produced. They didn't like him because he did expose what was going on, and it was incontestable. This doesn't prove anything. No. I mean, there's no doubt power blocks exist, secret services exist, or, this is the nature of the game. The royal family, the monarchies are constitutional. Our monarchy is constitutional. In other words, the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, and the monarchy as a whole, they have centuries of history in their blood, and this is their strength. They do have to move in a financial world. I mean, you don't run a monarchy on shirt buttons. She's bound to have investments, and she can only her investments can only be geared to the existing financial system, the financial order. I can't see any other way. The monarchies have to be paid for, but you wouldn't expect to see the Queen catching a corporation bus or riding a bicycle to the opening of Parliament. State coach, an entourage, this army of aides and so on working for her. And okay, you may get the odd rogue in the pack, but I don't think they last long, and I don't think their exposures, if they try to expose anything in the media, last very long. It's soon forgotten. The monarchy know what they're about. The monarchies are a survival group on their own, even the redundant monarchies around the world. And if you have a funeral or a wedding, you will find they're represented. They all gather together. They're in touch, which is entirely logical. But you know, this is the way the monarchy works. I mean, I'd be very surprised if Coleman has ever met a member of the royal family. I've shaken hands with the Queen. You know, one look from her and she could turn you to stone. But she is a very human person. She you know, she is the Queen, and you expect her to have an aura about her. Yeah, she's certainly, as I say, a very human person, but she has the authority. She's been brought up in a very practical way as a child, and you know, they're perfectly normal people. But I was talking to some years ago Captain Bowes Lyon, which is the late Queen Mother's family name, was staying overnight in a mess where I was living. And we got into conversation over a drink. And he said, you know, you never break in to the monarchy. And he gave me an example. He said, when we had this agony over Princess Margaret's romance with Group Captain Townsend, not even the great Sir Winston Churchill could get near them. Now that is what he told me. I've only his word for it. This is what monarchy is all about. They're not going to reveal secrets to a man like Coleman, and they're not going to leave secrets lying about. They, as I say, they're an institution, and they know how to survive, and they have centuries of wisdom behind them. The Queen doesn't go around, as he claims Queen Victoria did, launching wars. Absolute balderdash. The governments do that. You've got a classic case with Blair, our late unlamented Prime Minister, and the illegal invasion of Iraq. The Queen may discuss things with the Prime Minister of the day, but it doesn't mean to say she doesn't send armies. My oath of allegiance was taken to the monarch, not to the Prime Minister.
But Barry, don't they use the royal prerogative to wage war? The Prime Minister of the day.
Well, I mean, it's rather like a reference made, I think it was by the Swinton Circle, to the Secretary of the Privy Council, who questioned the legality of frog-marching Britain into Europe. In other words, it would undermine the authority of the monarchy as the head of the country, as it were. And the reply was rather convoluted and rather cunning, because it really said, you know, the Queen does what she is advised. In other words, you know, it was saying if the Queen's advised to cut her own throat, the constitutional way is that she takes the advice of her Privy Council. I think the monarchy, if it wants to put the boot in, I mean, it's only my guess. Again, one can only look from the outside. Individuals like Prince Charles will have far more freedom to speak than the monarch, to buck the system. I mean, he has run a campaign against genetically modified organisms in food and agriculture. He's run a campaign on behalf of natural medicine. He's not afraid to put the boot in. The Queen could not afford to get involved. Her Majesty could not afford to get involved, and doesn't. I mean, let us say hypothetically, the Queen was determined to, for some major crisis in the country, the Queen was appealed to, and the Queen decided to sack the Prime Minister or buck the system in some way, quite seriously. It could only ever be done once. I'm sure of that. It's logical. No monarch could afford to challenge her or his constitutional role and fail and not win. It could only happen to fail and it would finish it. I mean, I'm talking as somebody who is not part of the system, who observes it, and one can only talk from what one sees and what one's observed over the years.
I'm reminded of the last sentence of a postcard that's been produced to send to the Queen to ask her to refuse her royal assent to the European Constitution, the Reform Treaty, unless we've had a full and fair referendum. The last sentence of that says, I know that Your Majesty must abide by the advice of your ministers, but it's constitutional for that to happen. But at the same time, it is unconstitutional for the ministers to give you unconstitutional advice. So it reminds me of that sentence.
You're flying your anti-European Union kite. Well, I'd be interested to see the reply. Have you had one yet?
Well, I don't think anyone will get a reply because.
Yeah, let me know when you get it.
Yeah, I don't think I'll get a reply.
That's as much as one can say. And I am talking as an individual who's spent 20 years of analysis and research and writing, not about the monarchy, but about the secret societies and all the power structures in the world, and domestically. And I'm not an expert on the monarchy. I just happen to be a monarchist. They're human beings at the end of the day, but the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, is the Queen. End of discussion. And he can shut up.